Welcome back to this course on copyright and related rights law. In the previous sessions, in understanding the subject matter of musical works, we have understood that music is different from the form of its fixation. We have understood that music is a perception of the listener as a pleasingly harmonious sound, a melodic sound. The fact that human sounds are capable of being composed in distinct expressions, enabling the distinction between the musicality in animal sounds and the compositional faculties in humans. What we will look at today in this particular session is whether music is in fact finite. Compositional faculties can lead to a creative expression, but if the creative expressions themselves are limited, will it be possible for new music compositions to appear? Consider this question: is composition dependent on the instrument based on our earlier understanding? Try and answer this question. Consider a drum or a guitar or a piano or someone's voice. Is music dependent on an instrument? You must have realized that through graphical notations, an expression of composition is possible, and therefore composition is not dependent on any instrument, but the music that the composition captures is distinct. In this image, you can see apples of different colors, but it doesn't change the fact that these are apples. Similarly, instruments of various varieties can constitute the same music, albeit having some different properties, just like these apples. These are apples, but of a different color and probably of a slightly different taste. In instruments too, a guitar sounds different than a piano, but the music that they generate could be substantially the same. But where different instruments can carry a substantially same piece of music, what about different compositions and distinct expressions of musical expression? Are these limitless? In this context, let us look at two subject matters that we have already discussed. Consider literary creativity. Can we say that literary creativity is limited in some sense? Similarly, can we say that artistic creativity is limited in some sense? You can see on your screen many different artistic expressions on canvas. They seem to be representing, many of them, flowers. But the expression of these flowers in its varied aspect is original. Flowers, which are common subjects, can be represented in limitless number of ways. Therefore, not restricting artistic creativity in any way. Similar is the case with books. A given idea can be distinctively expressed in limitless number of ways. But is this the case with musical works as well? In leading up to an answer to this question, we must understand what are the problems with having limited expressions. Even if independently created, the expression would be similar to an existing creation. How are independent creations similar? Consider this question for a moment. You must be considering the possibility that two people who do not have any access to each other and their expressions can possibly create a similar expression. As such, this doesn't seem to be problematic. But if the number of ways in which a subject matter can be expressed is limited, then the possibility of such similarities increases manifold. When you place this in the context of creativity around the world, geographic separation can ensure that a person who is in Peru might not have any real connection to a person in India. In the absence of any accessibility, the first question is it possible for these two individuals, creative individuals, to create a similar expression? It seems possible. Secondly, what are the chances of a similar expression if the number of musical expressions that are possible are limited? They seem higher. We should also consider here the effect of digital media. Now that musical expressions which are being performed and recorded are being broadcasted to all corners of the world, there is a possible limitation in such communications as well, wherein the communication may not be reaching certain geographic locations because of any subjective reason. Therefore, even without any accessibility, it could be possible that two persons independently can arrive at a similar expression if the number of expressions possible are limited. What we'll end up with are two expressions that are very similar, and in terms of whether both should be eligible for a musical work protection, we have understood a general principle in copyright law, which we understood in the University of London versus University Tutorial Press case. You would recall that where an expression satisfies an objective assessment and can be categorized as a subject matter, the next step is to see whether it is original. and the foundational understanding of the term original and its qualification is that the work must originate from the claimant and it should not be copied from someone else. Therefore, in satisfying this principle, it is theoretically possible for many people to have copyright in substantially similar expressions. Practically though, this is a difficult proposition. But if the number of expressions that are possible are limited, then this practical difficulty eases. This foundational issue that limitation of expression poses to the consideration of copyrightability has been explored by Damien Riehl, a copyright attorney, who places this question in the realm of math. He states that let us understand what music is. Music, at its very basic, is a combination of single notes, what we know now as melody. But there are only 8 musical notes. Mathematically, it should be possible to generate a list of all possible combinations of these 8 notes, meaning that if these 8 notes and their combinations are created and then represented in some form of a fixation, is it possible then to say that all the possible compositions have now been achieved? Let us consider these questions. Is it not possible for independent creations to be similar without access? We are understanding that it is. The second question, what if the possibilities of creation are finite? We are understanding that the possibilities of similarity are much higher. How Riehl explains this is that he says that musicians, are they in fact creating anything if they are simply pulling combinations out of a finite list of possible compositions? And if all of these combinations can be generated and stored on some medium, is he then holding the copyright on the entire melodic set? If that is the case, then anyone who's looking to add some music would have to seek authorization from Damien Riehl. The basic consideration that there should be distinctiveness of expression evaporates. Still further, Damien Riehl poses another complex problem, and which is What if all of these combinations are released into the public domain for anybody for free to use? Would that mean now that there is no creative musical expression possible? We find this argument does resonate against the foundation that copyright exists in expressions and the fact that these expressions are not limited. The issue of limitations in musical work or in the creation of music leads to the understanding that there are a possible number of higher similarities that are happening with respect to music than with other works. And this is where we will discuss the role of musicologists. We see routinely in copyright infringement cases involving the subject matter of musical works, the claimant and the defendant bring in experts of music, musicologists, to help explain the finer details of the music. Who is a musicologist? He is an expert in or student of music as an academic subject, as opposed to someone trained in performance or composition. Because of the possibility of higher similarities that are resulting in musical work creations than other works, to help understand finer distinctions in the music and its taking, for example, a musicologist can assist the court. What the musicologist can help explain, for example, is whether there is in fact any similarity beyond what is not commonly discernible, and if in fact a work is so close to another that it could be presumed that it is based on it. Or in other words, the similarities are so many that it is all but impossible that the person had no access to the original work. Let us consider the opinions of two musicologists in a case that arose in the US called Repp and K&R Music versus Andrew Lloyd. In this particular case, two pieces of music were being considered, and it was being seen whether there were similarities between these two compositions. The two musicologists were Professor Hitchcock and James Mack. They were brought in by the plaintiffs on their behalf, and they submitted reports and attested their opinions. Professor Hitchcock was a distinguished professor of music at the City University of New York and founding director of the Institute for Studies in American Music at Brooklyn College of City University. He is the author of a number of scholarly books and articles about music. Professor Hitchcock provided a 35-page musicological analysis with attached charts to support his conclusion that one of the compositions was based on the other. For many of us, lay persons who listen to similar music, it is a question of common perception and understanding of music, which leads us to think that they are substantially similar. But the expert musicologist, as in this case can be seen, is capable of generating a mass distinction between two compositions. In his analysis, Professor Hitchcock examined the overall structure, rhythm and meter, melody and harmony, and the interaction of these elements in the two pieces as a whole. Hitchcock found the basic rhythmic character and the basic metrical character of each piece identical, although the two pieces are written in different harmonic modes. Hitchcock opined that they reveal significant correspondences and in harmonic rhythm an absolute identity. According to Professor Hitchcock, the principal and most important aspect to be considered in the comparison of the two pieces is the melody of each piece. In analyzing the pitch and rhythm as the constituent elements of melody, Professor Hitchcock asserted that there were striking similarities between the two melodies. His conclusion was that between Till You and Phantom Song, the similarities are so many in so many areas over such an extraordinary proportion of the compositions that I cannot consider them as insignificant or coincidental, and I must conclude that Phantom Song is based on Till You. Let us also take a look at the second opinion which comes in from the second musicologist, Professor Mack. Professor Mack was a professor and chairman of the Humanities Department at Harold Washington College in Chicago, Illinois. He has composed music and has been employed as an arranger, conductor, and record producer. He also has been involved in the production of radio and television commercials. Professor Mack has conducted various symphony orchestras in the performance of his own works and has performed as a flautist on a number of occasions. Mack approached the music in question from a contemporary commercial point of view, as well as from the traditional academic perspective utilized by Professor Hitchcock. Although he was largely in agreement with Professor Hitchcock's analysis and conclusions, Professor Mack found even more similarities, particularly harmonic similarities that were found by Hitchcock. Mack's analysis also took into account his opinion that oral impressions are more significant in commercial music than in symphonic music because the former is designed for the lay listener who derives his impression from what he or she hears. Professor Mack concluded that Till You and Phantom are strikingly similar and are so similar as to preclude separate creation. What we have been able to see is that the opinion of musicologists is a technically sound opinion which is different from the kind of similarity analysis that could be possibly conducted by lay persons not experts in the science of music. What they have been able to find is that on account of the technical similarities, one of these compositions was based on the other. But the theoretical issue or the foundational problem that we were looking to highlight was that can it not be stated that two composers not connected to each other in any way can in fact arrive at strikingly similar compositions. If the number of compositions that are possible are in fact limited in nature. The finite nature of music can therefore create problems as time progresses and more compositions come into the market. With this, we have understood, hopefully, the meaning of music. In the next session, we will be looking at the distinction between music and sound recording, or musical work and sound recording. We've understood that music is a type of sound, and therefore, is it then any different from a sound recording? At least terminologically and on a basic foundational difference, it seems different. But what are the real differences? Thank you for joining me. I will see you again in the next session. Thank you.